Hi, this is Louisa at the Pilates workshop. I'm just going to do a short video to help with some hamstring release and hip mobility. And to do this one, you'll need a resistance band. If you've got one, or an old scarf, or maybe even an old pair of tights or something like that. So the pink one here is lighter resistance, purple one is medium. Both have their place. So the purple one gives you a bit more support as long as you don't hold it too tight and make it too taut. And the lighter one sometimes is helpful as well. So use what you have and then tweak accordingly. So to start with, we'll come into your relaxation position. So lie onto your side, roll onto your back. So you've got the pelvis neutral, hip bones level with each other, and your belly button and your pubic bone and the legs parallel. Soften the upper ribs down, lengthen the back of the neck. You may need your little cushion under your head, and just take a few minutes to breathe and just ground yourself and settle down into your mat. Okay, and then once you're ready, I'm going to grab my pink band today. We'll come to a single knee fold, and we're going to wrap the band around the arch of your foot. Now my bands are really long because I've cut them, so your band might not be as long as if it's a pre-cut one rather than one cut off of the roll. So try to unfurl that band and have it even length on both sides. And we'll just start with your knee over your hip. Okay, so not too far in that you've tucked or tilted, or too far away that you arch your back. So knee over the hip and the shin parallel with the floor. The position to hold the band is also important, just so we don't strain the wrists at all. So have elbows on the floor or on your mat, forearms up, and then hold with this loose fist, so you're not having to twist the wrists at all as you go. Otherwise slipping down. There, okay. So then we're in that knee fold position, wide breath. And as you breathe out and engage your centre, we're just going to push away against that band. So there is some resistance there. I want you to try and keep your arms really still. And although we're lengthening the leg, I don't want you to lock into the back of that knee joint. Okay? And then inhale, slowly resist as you come back with the band. So try and let the band ping you back. So breathing out and centre as you lengthen away. And then inhale to come back in. So I'm going to do up to 5. Good. Keeping the pelvis steady, trying to keep the hip, the knee and the foot aligned. Got 1 or 2 more. Right, and then on your last one, leave that leg lengthened so you come into your hamstring stretch position. If you need to slacken off the band at all, you can do. And then let that leg rise up as far as you can maintain that stability through the pelvis, the same distance rib to hip, and just take a few breaths into there. If your calves maybe feel a little bit tight as well, you could flex that foot, but try not to curl the toes. So get to that point, take a few breaths, let it lengthen and release. And then we're going to just turn that leg out from the hip. So I've just spiraled the leg outwards from the hip. It's not shifted away from me. You might just find a slightly different stretch there, and spiral back into your neutral parallel position in that midline. And then we'll turn in from the hip, still keeping everything else as steady as you can. And then you can unravel back to that parallel position. And then from here, if it's okay for your back and your other hip, you could slide this leg away, otherwise keep it slightly bent, but just careful if you lengthen this leg away that it doesn't encourage your back to arch. As we breathe out and centre now, we're just going to let that leg shift away from your midline, but we're trying not to hitch up the hip as you go. Then you can slacken off that band if you need to. Draw it back to the centre, so just breathing, centering throughout, and then the leg's going to go across the midline, still keeping that same length rib to hip. It may not go too far. Generally, this can feel quite tight and intense stretch, so don't force, just ease and breathe into that. Okay. And I'm just going to do 1 more to each side. Depending on your hip mobility, if it's comfortable for you in this position and the hips aren't gripping like mad, and this other leg back into relaxation position, you could keep that leg long, turn out from the hip, and do some leg circles in this position. So we're stirring that hip joint. We're not really pulling on the band to bring you round, but the band is giving you some support. So perhaps between 5 to 8 in each direction. I'm just going to do a few in reverse. Okay. a minuscule little turnout for your circles. You can do that with the other leg lengthened away as well if that's all right for your back, but it's probably a little bit harder to stabilise. If that straight leg position is really tight for you to circle, we'll bend the leg back in and just use the band around the back of the middle of your thigh, elbows on the floor. You can either keep that leg at that right angle and stir, but for more release, let's release that shin so you can really get that sense of the thigh sinking into the hip socket and then stirring there. You keep the arm still, or you can ease that around with the band if you need to. A few in each direction, and we're just oiling and lubricating the joints. Okay, so we'll go through those on the other leg now. Okay, a few each way. So we started off coming in to neutral and then knee folding, and then bringing that second leg up to that knee fold position. So even length of the band through both sides. Try to have knee over the hip and the shin at parallel with the floor. Okay. Good alignment through the wrists and the upper body. So the first one we did was the piston, and I'm keeping the pelvis steady, waist long, ribs heavy. As you breathe out and centre, I'm just lengthening that leg away, pushing it away in the band. So once I've lengthened away, the knees are normally pretty much aligned or quite close to being level, and then resist that band as you come in on the inhale. So we'll do at least 5 here. If you've got a bit longer, you can do a few more. As you're pressing away, we're trying to keep the hip, the knee and the ankle aligned without locking out at the back of that knee joint. So about your 5 there. And you can lengthen away into your hamstring stretch. So still lengthen, but try not to lock out. Let that leg ease up to where you can. So keep that tailbone heavy. If it starts to curl up, you've gone a little too far, and just lower that leg down and level out that tailbone. So find that hamstring stretch position for you. Take some breaths into there. Slacken off the band if you need to. Now once that's begun to give and release, if you want to add the calf stretch, you can flex the foot, but try not to curl the toes up with you. And then on the other side, we also just did a little turn out from the hips. I'm just spiraling that leg out in the hip socket, so you can take a breath or two into there. And then back to that midline, and then turn in a little, so spiraling in, but we're still keeping that length through the waist, and then back to the centre. If it's comfortable for your back and your hip, you can slide the other leg away, or just slide it a little bit away. Careful the back doesn't start to arch and the ribs don't pop as you do that. And then as you breathe out and centre now, we'll just let that leg shift away from you, but you're keeping the waist long, back through to the midline, and it can come across you, so you get that stretch and release from the outer thigh up to your glutes as well. Okay, a few of those, 2 or 3. Slacken off the band if you need to, especially as it's coming across, because that's probably the most intense one for all of us. And then you can come back to the midline. I'm going to bring the other leg back into relaxation position. If it's comfortable to keep the leg lengthened away, you can do some circles here. So that leg is long, very slightly turned out from the hip, and the arms stay still. Breathing and scooping, you're stirring around in that hip joint. Between 5 to 8 in each direction. Still keeping that slight turn out. The inner thighs should be working to help you stir that leg. Good. If that's a bit too tight, the other version is you come into parallel, you'll bend that leg and just have the band around the back of the middle of your thigh. And you can keep the leg at a right angle, or just release the shin so that thigh can really sink into the hip socket and that tailbone can release. And then breathing and scooping, you're stirring that thigh bone in your hip. A few each way. Still keep that waist long and lifted. You can either keep the arms quite still or use them to help just ease that leg around. So if that's more sort of for release and mobility, especially if the hips feel a little bit tight in that straight leg version of the circles. So a few each way, and then you can release the band if you want to at the end. Hug them in either with the hands loosely over the knees or behind. A few breaths into there. Okay, and then perhaps just sliding one leg away while you keep one in that hug position. Sliding the other one in and switching over. A few breaths into there. And then sliding the other one back. And then you can lower and Hopefully that's helped loosen up your hips and your hamstrings a little bit. Let me know, and thank you very much.